Hello, welcome to The Conversation on News Central Television. It's a program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Benga Aboroa.
And I am Rita Omodia. Today on The Conversation, Kenya's opposition leader Raila Odinga had revealed that as of Tuesday, July 11, over 1.2 million Kenyans had logged on to the newly launched tumechoka.com platform, a digital signature collection drive created mainly to canvass for the petition to delegitimize President William Ruto's administration.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria, in a recent crackdown on oil theft and illegal oil bunkering, the country's state-owned oil company, NNPC, has announced that an oil tanker capable of carrying 800,000 litres of smuggled crude oil has been intercepted offshore while heading to Cameroon. Interesting developments in both Nigeria and also in Kenya.
Yeah.
I mean, President William Ruto is he hasn't even spent a year in office.
Well, August 1st, August 1st, that was when we had the election, but let's August to make it like a year.
1 year. And it's just been one obstacle over the other. And the demonstrations today led to quite a number of deaths. And it's the first time we're seeing this intensity outside Nairobi. So I wonder how he will be able to focus on his presidency with all this distractions. But I guess we'll get to the meat of it during our conversation.
Definitely, I have thoughts for the same thing too. And we saw a crackdown on opposition protests. I don't know why, or the plan or the scheme that William Ruto has, because I think this will be used against him if he goes that way, because you feel there's a right to protest, the right to express your grievances against the government. So why should there be a crackdown on opposition parties?
But then, I mean, where your freedoms end, it shouldn't interfere with other people's freedoms. People want to go about their daily lives and businesses, and those protests could be disruptive. They tell you to, close your businesses and all of that. So
well, there's always another side to it, but at the same time, I think those in Kenya will tell us how exactly the protest went and if it actually disrupted properties or individuals or businesses. And meanwhile, it's a good one for Nigeria. It has been a story throughout this stolen vessel that was intercepted and now burnt down. I look forward to this conversation.
Yes, and I wonder what the rationale is in burning and, polluting the environment by doing so.
I would have thought maybe another option would have been available than burning down the vessel.
Exactly. We'll get to that. But we begin in Kenya, where opposition leader Raila Odinga announced that over 1.2 million Kenyans had already participated in the tumechoka.com platform on Tuesday, July the 11th. The platform aims to gather 10 million signatures to challenge President William Ruto's administration due to concerns about new taxes and punitive policies. Protests led by Azimio supporters overwhelmed police in Nakuru and Mlolongo, causing them to retreat, and also a lot of damage to property. Access from Mombasa Road to Nairobi was cut off at Mlolongo, leading to looting and 3 fatalities so far.
Raila Odinga revealed that over 1.2 million Kenyans engaged with tumechoka.com to challenge President William Ruto's administration. In other developments, protests led by Azimio supporters overwhelmed police in Nakuru and Mlolongo, causing retreat and property damage. Access from Mombasa Road to Nairobi was cut off at Mlolongo, leading to looting and 3 fatalities. And now join us for this conversation, we have Daniel Juma Omondi, Executive Director, Global Peace Foundation, Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on The Conversation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Now, going straight to discussions, the tumechoka.com platform has gained significant attention by amassing over 1.2 million signatures from Kenyans seeking to delegitimize President William Ruto's administration. Could you explain the significance of this platform and its role in mobilizing public support for the petition?
Thank you. Usually, signatures are a way of people expressing their opinion on an issue, and this is not an exception. However, I must let you know that the collection of signatures is not in itself a means to be able to remove a president from power. In Kenya, presidents can only be voted out of office or impeached through parliament and through the Senate. And in this case, I think the opposition leaders know very, very well that this exercise is in futility. However, it is their right to be able to engage their supporters. As you know, we have the next election is going to be in 3.5 years away from now.
Can you hear us, Daniel? So he was talking about the petition. All right, go on, please.
It's a very clever way for the opposition to be able to keep their supporters engaged and hopeful that they can be able to win power and come the next election. Otherwise, I do not see these signatures leading to the removal of President Ruto from office.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to bring in our second guest in this conversation. Caleb Wanga is the coordinator of Usalama Reforms Forum. He's also joining from Nairobi. A warm welcome to you, Caleb. Now, Raila Odinga mentioned that the petition aims to gather over 10 million signatures due to grievances with the current administration's new tax regime and other perceived punitive policies. Can you provide insights into these grievances and how have they contributed to the discontent among Kenyans? Is this really about the cost of living, or are there political undertones to this?
Okay, thank you so much. I know there are issues of taxation, high cost of living, but definitely it's a political issue. And, you know, there have been a lot of back and forth conflict since the last general elections last year. I hope you can hear me well. The opposition used the issue of high taxes and high cost of living to also advance political cause. And you remember Raila Odinga said that they have already collected 1.2 million signatures. Yeah, constitutionally there are requirements that must be followed, but in this case, we are still not very, very sure the end game, and we hope that we will be able to understand it in time.
Definitely, we really want to understand what is going on. Now, I'm going to bring Daniel back into this conversation. And regarding the petition to remove William Ruto from office, what are the specific goals and objectives outlined by the organizers? How exactly does this movement plan to address the concerns raised by the public?
Right now, I think the opposition, they have been, of course, somewhat effective in engaging their people to rise up against the high cost of living. As you know, these protests, also called maandamano in Swahili, began as initially as a grievance against the election of President Ruto. But after the finance bill was passed, that saw the cost of VAT go up, the cost of fuel go up. This has made the cost of transport, the cost of other basic commodities to go up. So the opposition has found it very effective. It's like a blessing in disguise for them to have an issue that resonates with the Kenyan people. This issue is resonating with every Kenyan people because when prices of goods go up, everybody, irrespective of your political party, whether you're in Kenya Kwanza, whether you're in Azimio, you're going to be affected one way or the other when the cost of living is high. So the Raila Odinga and the Azimio are taking advantage of this very, very emotive issue to be able to engage and to be able to wipe up support, amongst Kenyans as they prepare, for the next election.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to bring Caleb back into the conversation. Now, Caleb, we saw images, very disturbing images of protests today. Can you provide more details about the protest in Shabab, Nakuru West, where the police were overrun by Azimio supporters? They had to retreat. What were the key issues that motivated these protesters to take to the streets? And what's the count so far?
The problem on how even the police behave was managing public demonstrations. I know there are instances in Western Kenya where police have been overwhelmed, and this has forced sometimes police to use live ammunition, and that has led to deaths. So we are just waiting to see even how oversight agencies that deal with the police are going to react to the situation. But in several places, demonstrations turned violent purely because of the police conduct. And as I said earlier, there are clear regulations of how police should be acting based on the standing orders of the police. So we are waiting to see how the reaction is going to be, even from the government and also from the Justice Department of the government of Kenya.
Okay, now, Daniel, still looking at these protests. I mean, we saw that the Nairobi Expressway suffered vandalism by a large crowd of protesters in Mlolongo. I want you to give us more details of this and what exactly the underlying reasons behind such an act was.
Yes, so it's very sad that the protesters, of course, took advantage of the protests, which were meant to be peaceful. To vandalize the Nairobi Expressway. I think this was one way of expressing their anger against the government for not listening to their pleas. Now, as you may recall, a few days ago, on the 7th of July, we had 6 people dying in what was called the Sabasaba protest. Of course, the police, were blamed for the death of these 6 people. Some of the people who died during this protest were not even taking part in the protest, but somehow they were caught up in the stray bullets. So we have a big problem here where we have the opposition calling people to come out into the streets, and yet we have a police force that is still not so professional to be able to handle demonstrations the way we see it in civilized democracies. We have protests going on in several countries. I was seeing even in Jerusalem, people are protesting, but the police are there, but the people are very peaceful, waving flags, and the police are there to protect demonstrators. In Kenya, unfortunately, we still have a problem because the police, all they do is to throw tear gas at protesters. And then once that is done, then the people also, they throw stones back at the police and making the protest very chaotic. And so everybody has been, of course, blaming the police. But on the other hand, also, you must also heap some blame on the opposition politicians, because they know very, very well that our police are still not very professional. And yet they ask these innocent young people to come out into the streets, and then they die. Once people die, they're not going to come back.
But Daniel, do you think that President William Ruto has handled these grievances properly? I mean, it seems like the opposition is taking advantage of this slow response by William Ruto.
The president, both sides, especially the president, as they say, to whom much is given, so much is expected. So the buck stops with the president. The president has a responsibility. He's the symbol of national unity. He must be able to build consensus amongst all Kenyans, to bring all Kenyans together. So I know he had tried when we had the protest that ended earlier on, when he called the opposition people to come to the table, and he set up the bipartisan talks in Parliament. Unfortunately, these bipartisan talks has not been very effective, and the opposition walked out on these talks. And now we are back again to square one. So the president must again rise up to the occasion. He is the only president that we have, and it is him who can be able to sort out these issues. The opposition has nothing to lose. All the opposition wants to do is to demonstrate that they can cause chaos. But when they cause chaos, we lose money, we lose taxes. The government needs taxes to be able to run. And so the president must understand that he has more to lose than the opposition, and therefore he needs to call them to the table and be able to listen to the grievances and see what give and take he is able to do. So unfortunately, so far, the president hasn't handled this well, and we expect him as civil society to again, have a retrospect and see how this issue can be handled, to the best conclusion.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now, Caleb, this demonstrations have taken another dimension. We did see that the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway was disrupted, leading to loss of economic activities. And we've also seen the increase in the loss of lives. So this has clearly taken a new dimension, and the opposition is not backing down. They've said there will be weekly protests, and like Daniel just said, the bipartisan talks in Parliament are not leading anywhere. What are the consequences, or what are the possible consequences of these continuous demonstrations? Because there's loss of lives, the people are going to get bolder, and if things are not addressed properly, it could snowball into something bigger that might consume the entire country. What do you recommend the government should do at this point? And also the opposition?
Actually, thank you so much for that question, and I hope you can hear me well. Number one, the government should re-engage with the opposition in a structured manner. The way my colleague Daniel has just said about bipartisan talks that collapsed, and it collapsed purely because of lack of trust, kind of sabotage that came from either both parties or mostly from the government side, because that is the main reason why the government walked out. The consequences of some of the things that are happening in Kenya, we have a bulging youth population that are unemployed. Somebody will tap and organize them into violent structures that government might not be able to handle. You know, our police do not have enough capacity even to handle some of the simple crises. That is why you could see young people running around now openly mugging people because police are not able to contain anything. So the government must re-engage in a structured talk, and in a talk that also aligned with the Constitution of Kenya. That is the only way. And the president must stop bragging and just stamping. That is not going to help Kenya. Yesterday, actually, the situation today wasn't because of the statements that came from the president and his team yesterday in a public rally. You don't just stamp to people who are protected by the Constitution. Kenya has a very robust constitution, and a structured engagement is going to give us the way forward. Otherwise, we might end up in a more chaotic and more volatile and more unstable situation in the future.
Now, still on the government reacting or response to all of this, how soon or do we expect more protests happening? That's Daniel. This question is centered to you. And let's look at the situation in the economy of Kenya, because we talk about high taxes. I mean, there are underlying reasons why these protests are so aggravated. What exactly is the situation? And how is President William Ruto handling this to, forestall future protests?
The finance bill 2023, which is being contested here by the opposition, is one of the main causes of the current protests. And as you know, the opposition politicians went to court, and the court suspended the implementation of the finance bill, 2023. Unfortunately, the EPRA, which is in charge of fuel, increasing fuel, they went ahead and implemented the increase of VAT. So we saw the price of fuel go by more than 10 shillings. And this is one of the things that has angered many people, going forward. So we, of course, expect that the president has a right, of course, to increase, to be able to collect taxes. And since he was elected, this president, of course, found so many debts. He found so many debts that were being accrued by the previous government. And, some of the monies, basically were lost through corruption. So I understand where this president is coming from, that he has the government to run. He found almost empty coffers, and he's trying very, very well that Kenya should not be able to default on its international obligations. However, I think that they have an opportunity to bring these people together. He can sit down with Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta and say, look, this is what you left me. I have empty coffers. I need to run this administration. What do you think? What is the best way for us to raise this, if you don't want to be able to, for us to raise money through the finance bill. So I think the president needs to bring them to the table and have a discussion with them, and let the members of parliament from both sides, be able to see which are the areas, which are the give and takes, that they can be able to look at, so that the nation can move on. We cannot afford this noise every now and then. Actually, today the Kenya Private Sector Alliance said that we are losing billions, because of these unnecessary protests that are going on in the country.
Quite unnecessary. It depends on the camp you're asking. Caleb, as we begin to wrap up, there's a school of thought that says, looking at the opposition leader Raila Odinga's trajectory in history, that all of this protest is to force himself into a government of national unity, to be part of a sort of power-sharing deal. They look at the history with Uhuru Kenyatta and also former President Mwai Kibaki. What do you make of this insinuations? And looking at the fact that President William Ruto is just barely a year into government, you would expect some level of benefit of doubt to wait and see how things work out. But this protest are almost like Daniel said, the business community in Kenya they're complaining there are very negative effects to it, and it's also hemorrhaging the economy. So what do you think the final end game is for Raila Odinga?
The end game, actually, the issue of forming political coalitions, sometimes in Kenya we call them handshake, it's given a lot of names, have been used for political smearing, mostly by the government to belittle the former prime minister. Even some of these demonstrations, people in the government say that Raila is used to creating crisis so that he become part of a government. And he has denied this 1,000 times, that he have no business engaging in a kind of a coalition with William Ruto and his team. And the main reason about this is because he has been accused of being part of the economic saboteurs. And he said that William Ruto was Uhuru's deputy. So even some of the debts that Kenya took that cannot be accounted for, William Ruto has been part of that government. So when they accuse him, they use issues of handshake or demonstration for political smearing, saying that that is his habit. I don't think if that will help Kenya to move forward. That is why I propose that we need a very, very structured engagement, as this had been proposed by civil society, so that we use our own constitution to build a proper dialogue process that can take Kenya forward. Just something and political smearing and sloganeering that is all over will not help us move forward. So the end game is still very difficult to ascertain at this point, and we look into the near future, we see the direction the entire engagement framework will take.
But Daniel, quickly, looking at this political implications of all of this, I mean, on one side, people are looking at the end game of Raila Odinga. There's still a pushback from William Ruto's camp with the protests and the economy, finance bill, tax regimes that people are not happy about. Is it possible that there will be a shared government, or William Ruto will be forced towards it? I mean, the August is marking a year that we had the elections last year. So what are the potential political implications if this is not handled properly?
I don't think there's going to be power sharing. I think both sides have been very clear that they do not want to share power. The president actually, campaigned on the grievance that it is the previous administration's kind of indirect share power sharing, also called the handshake, that caused the kind of economic problem we had. And he has been saying that during that arrangement between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, the opposition actually died. There was no opposition to be able to check the administration, and as a result, the government lost a lot of money through corruption. So President Ruto has been saying that he needs a strong opposition, and I think that's one of the reasons why he has been. He's even proposed earlier on that he wants to establish an official opposition office funded by the government to be able to to check his administration. So I do not think this will end up in a power sharing, government administration. But I believe that the issues at hand here, I think most likely President Ruto may be forced to look at some aspects of the finance bill. Some of those that are making life a little bit difficult, I think those can be agreed on. The other issue on the table is the issue of the electoral commissioners. So, as you know, they already hiring new commissioners. But I think that is one of the issues that the president is willing to be able to discuss with the opposition, so that the next election can be perceived to be on a fair, playing field, as opposed to right now when the opposition feels like the government would have an advantage as a result of being the only ones who picked the IEBC official.
Thank you very much, Daniel Juma Amondi, Executive Director, Global Peace Foundation, Kenya, and also Caleb Owanga, Coordinator, Usalama Reforms Forum. We do appreciate your insights and contributions to the discussion this evening on The Conversation. Thank you.